For Maxwell Mercer, real estate wasn't just a business. It was an art. Over the years, he had built an empire, turning neglected properties into high-value assets, flipping homes, and revitalizing entire neighborhoods. His name carried weight. In the industry, though, he preferred to operate quietly. He wasn't just rich. He was strategic, patient, and always 5 steps ahead of the competition. So when he came across an expansive, beautifully structured estate, nestled within a well-manicured HOA community, he saw potential. The property was an architectural gem, a sprawling, modern meets traditional masterpiece, with floor-to-ceiling windows, a landscaped backyard, and a private drive that whispered exclusivity. It wasn't just a home, it was a statement. The HOA neighborhood itself was pristine, almost eerily so. Perfectly aligned houses, identical mailboxes, and not a single blade of grass out of place. The streets were quiet, the atmosphere almost too controlled. But Maxwell had dealt with HOA communities before. Some were manageable, others a bureaucratic nightmare. But he never let that stop him from making a good investment. At the open house, he caught the first glimpse of the HOA board members, a small, tight-knit group of individuals who carried themselves with an air of authority. Leading them was a woman in her mid-50s, sharp-eyed and exuding an unmistakable sense of control. Her name? Karen Whitmore. She introduced herself with a smile that barely touched her eyes. "Mr. Mercer, welcome to Oak Ridge Estates. I must say, we have very high standards here, and we take our community rules very seriously." Maxwell had encountered Karens like her before, self-important, power-hungry, and obsessed with micromanaging others. He simply nodded, his practiced, easygoing demeanor never faltering. "Good to know. I'm looking forward to being a part of the community." Karen's gaze lingered on him a second longer than necessary, almost as if she were trying to size him up. But Maxwell wasn't worried. He had faced bigger sharks in the real estate world. What was the worst an HOA could do? As he signed the closing documents and secured the property, he had no idea that Karen Whitmore had already marked him as a problem, and that she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that like button, share it with friends, and subscribe for more awesome content. And while you're at it, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. All right, let's keep going. It didn't take long for Maxwell Mercer to realize that Oak Ridge Estates wasn't just a well-manicured neighborhood. It was a kingdom, and Karen Whitmore ruled it with an iron fist. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a neatly folded letter tucked under his front door just 3 days after he moved in. Maxwell, sipping his morning coffee, raised an eyebrow as he unfolded the crisp white paper. Notice of violation. Dear Mr. Mercer, it has come to our attention that your front lawn does not meet the Oak Ridge Estates community standards. The grass exceeds the allowable height of 2 inches, as per Section 4.3 of the HOA bylaws. We kindly request you trim it immediately to avoid further action. Maxwell let out a soft chuckle. 2 inches? He hadn't even unpacked all his boxes, let alone thought about mowing the lawn. Shrugging, he decided it was a minor inconvenience, nothing worth pushing back on. Yet. But then came the second notice. This time, it was about the color of his front door. The shade of navy blue you've chosen does not align with the HOA's approved color palette. Please repaint it to an acceptable neutral tone within 7 days to maintain the aesthetic integrity of the community. Maxwell exhaled slowly, irritation creeping in. The door was already the same color when he bought the house. How was it suddenly an issue now? He decided to address it directly. That evening, he strolled over to the HOA office, a small, pristine building near the community clubhouse. Inside, he found Karen sitting at her desk, reviewing documents with the air of a queen handling royal decrees. "Ah, Mr. Mercer," she said, setting her pen down and offering a thin smile. "I assume you're here about the notices?" Maxwell kept his expression calm. I am. The front lawn? I get it, I'll handle it. But the door? It's the same color it was when I purchased the property. Karen's smile didn't falter. Yes, well, that was an oversight from the previous owner. But now that you're here, we're simply enforcing the rules more strictly. Maxwell studied her, sensing something deeper behind her excessive need for control. This wasn't just about HOA regulations. It was about power. The next few weeks were a game of cat and mouse. One day it was a complaint about his garbage bins being placed 3 inches too far from the curb. Another day, he received a warning about unauthorized plants in his backyard. And then came the fine for leaving his porch light on past 10 p.m., a rule that didn't even exist in the HOA's bylaws. Each letter was signed with the same looping signature. Karen Whitmore. Maxwell remained polite, composed, and compliant, but only to a point. He followed the rules where he could, but he also started to document everything. Every complaint, every fine, every vague explanation from Karen. He wasn't just a homeowner at war with an overzealous HOA president. He was a real estate tycoon who had seen power-hungry people crumble under their own weight. And Karen? She had no idea who she was picking a fight with. The letters kept coming. At first, Maxwell laughed them off. The absurdity of a grown woman micromanaging his garbage bins and plant choices was almost comical. But Karen wasn't laughing. Her petty violations soon turned into something far more aggressive. The first fine was $50 for excessive lawn decorations, which, according to the letter, referred to a single stone birdbath near his porch. Then came another $100 penalty for having an unapproved vehicle in the driveway. His black Range Rover, which he had clearly registered with the HOA. Then the warnings turned into threats. Final notice: failure to comply with HOA regulations will result in legal action, including the possibility of a lien on your property. Maxwell sat in his office, flipping through the stack of violation notices, his jaw tightening. He dealt with bureaucratic red tape, corrupt developers, and city officials looking for a quick bribe. But this was different. Karen wasn't after compliance. She was after control, and Maxwell wasn't the type to be controlled. That night, instead of replying to the HOA's latest letter, he decided to dig deeper. Maxwell had connections: attorneys, real estate experts, even private investigators. It didn't take long for him to pull the HOA's financial records and legal history. What he found was worse than he expected. Over the past 5 years, Karen Whitmore and her board had filed multiple foreclosures against homeowners in Oak Ridge Estates. The pattern was clear. First, they'd flood a homeowner with bogus fines. Then, they'd pile on late fees and legal threats. Finally, when the fines exceeded a certain amount, they'd place a lien on the home, forcing the owner to sell, usually below market value. And the biggest red flag? Almost every property that had been foreclosed ended up being sold to a shell company, one that was suspiciously connected to Karen's family. Maxwell leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply. This wasn't just an overzealous HOA president. This was a full-blown scam, and Karen had just picked the wrong target. The next morning, Maxwell made a few calls. If Karen wanted to play games, he'd play better. First, he filed formal complaints with the state's housing authority, the county, attorney, and the real estate fraud division. He gathered testimonies from previous homeowners who had lost their properties under suspicious circumstances. Then, he met with his lawyer. "She's running an extortion racket," Maxwell said, sliding a file across the desk. "I want to hit her with everything we've got." His attorney skimmed through the documents, nodding. "This isn't just HOA abuse. This is fraud, coercion, and potentially racketeering. We can take this to court." Maxwell smirked, leaning forward. "Not yet. First, I want Karen to think she's winning. Because the best way to take down a power-hungry tyrant was to let them overplay their hand. The envelope arrived on a Monday morning, thick and official-looking, stamped with the HOA's seal in bold lettering. Maxwell Mercer didn't have to open it to know what it contained. He had been expecting this. Sitting in his sleek home office, he took his time peeling back the flap, unfolding the legal notice with the kind of detached curiosity a predator might have before striking. Notice of foreclosure action. Dear Mr. Mercer, due to unpaid HOA dues totaling $12,450, the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association has initiated foreclosure proceedings on your property, as per community bylaw regulations. You have 30 days to settle the outstanding balance, or further legal action will be pursued. Maxwell let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. $12,000? He had triple that amount in cash sitting in his wallet. But that wasn't the point. This wasn't about money. This was Karen's final power play. For weeks, she had bombarded him with unjustified fines and late fees, each one stacking on top of the last. He had never missed an actual HOA payment, but Karen had manipulated the records, fabricating penalties that spiraled into an amount high enough to trigger the HOA's foreclosure clause. It was a well-orchestrated scam, one that had worked on homeowners before him. But Maxwell Mercer wasn't just another homeowner. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it to find Karen Whitmore standing on his porch, her arms crossed, a victorious smirk playing on her lips. "Mr. Mercer," she greeted, her voice dripping with faux politeness. "I assume you've received our notice?" Maxwell leaned against the door frame, keeping his expression unreadable. "I have. You've certainly outdone yourself, Karen." Her smirk widened. "It's really quite simple. You broke the rules, you didn't pay the fines, and now—" She gestured around dramatically, as if already claiming his house as her own. "Well, let's just say this property will be going back into the right hands soon enough." Maxwell studied her, noting the arrogance in her posture, the way she reveled in her perceived victory. She truly believed she had won. "This isn't about the money," he said, his voice calm. "It never was. You just don't like that I won't roll over and let you run me out." Karen's lips curled. "This isn't personal, Mr. Mercer. It's business. You're just not the right fit for this community." Maxwell held back a smirk of his own. If only she knew how wrong she was. "Well," he said, folding the notice and slipping it into his pocket. "I guess we'll see how this all plays out." Karen's confidence didn't waver. "Oh, I already know how it'll play out," she said, turning on her heel. "I always win." Maxwell watched her walk away, letting her believe she had just delivered the final blow. What she didn't realize was she had just walked straight into a trap, because this time she wasn't dealing with a helpless homeowner. She was up against a real estate tycoon who had already set the pieces in motion to destroy her empire, and by the time she realized it, it would be far too late. Maxwell Mercer wasn't the type to lose sleep over threats, but he knew when a fight was worth his full attention. Karen Whitmore had played her hand, believing he was just another homeowner who would either pay up or fold under the weight of legal pressure. She had underestimated him. That was her first mistake. The morning after Karen's so-called victory lap, Maxwell sat in his home office, sipping his coffee as he dialed a familiar number. "Tell me you've got something good, Mike." Mike Harrington was one of the sharpest real estate attorneys in the city, a pit bull in a tailored suit. If there was a loophole to exploit or a legal noose to tighten, Mike was the man to do it. "Oh, I've got more than good," Mike replied, his voice tinged with amusement. "Your HOA? They've been cooking the books for years." Maxwell's eyes narrowed. "How bad?" Mike chuckled. "Bad enough that if this goes public, Karen won't just lose her little fiefdom. She could go to prison." Maxwell had already suspected fraud, but the extent of it was staggering. With Mike's legal team combing through financial records, they found a mountain of irregularities, bogus fines levied against homeowners, then funneled into maintenance fees that had no actual records of work being done. foreclosed properties, being sold to shell companies, all linked to Karen's close friends and family, unauthorized withdrawals from the HOA's reserve funds, masked as operating expenses but with no supporting invoices. In short, Karen hadn't just been abusing power. She had been embezzling funds for years. Maxwell leaned back in his chair, satisfied but not surprised. HOA fraud was common, but Karen had been reckless. She got greedy, she got sloppy, and now she was about to pay for it. "I want everything documented," Maxwell told Mike. "We go by the book, full legal exposure, no shortcuts." Mike smirked. "Already ahead of you. We're preparing formal complaints for the state's housing authority, the IRS, and the county prosecutor's office." Maxwell tapped his fingers against his desk, thinking, "That's a good start. But I want to hit her on every front." So he made a few more calls. First, to a top investigative journalist he knew. "I have a story for you," he said, sending over the HOA's fraudulent records. Then to a local homeowners advocacy group that had been fighting HOA corruption for years. "I think I've got your next big case," he told them. And finally, to his real estate network. "Start sniffing around Oak Ridge Estates," he instructed. "Karen's been rigging foreclosures. I want the market to know what's coming." By the time he was done, Karen Whitmore had no idea she was already surrounded. A few days later, Maxwell received another letter from the HOA. This time, it was a final demand for payment. Karen was doubling down, convinced that she had him backed into a corner. Maxwell smiled as he folded the letter and placed it in a file labeled Evidence. She thought this was over. She had no idea it was just getting started. The air inside the packed courtroom was thick with anticipation. Rows of homeowners, journalists, and legal professionals filled the benches, all eager to witness the downfall of Karen Whitmore and her corrupt HOA. Maxwell Mercer sat at the plaintiff's table, calm and composed, while Karen, seated with her attorney, wore a mask of forced confidence. But there was a crack in her usual arrogance, the slight twitch of her fingers, the stiff posture. She knew she was in trouble. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with piercing eyes, called the court to order. "We will now hear opening statements." Mike Harrington stood, buttoning his suit. "Your Honor, we intend to prove that the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, under Karen Whitmore's leadership, engaged in fraud, financial misconduct, and illegal foreclosure practices. My client, Mr. Mercer, along with several other affected homeowners, will present undeniable evidence of a systematic scheme designed to extort property owners for personal gain." Karen's lawyer, a slick-looking man named Gregson, attempted to downplay the accusations. "Your Honor, the HOA was merely enforcing its bylaws. Mr. Mercer, an outsider to our community, simply refused to comply. This case is nothing more than a wealthy investor trying to bend the rules to his liking." Maxwell exchanged a glance with Mike. Let them believe that. It wouldn't matter soon. The first few testimonies were damning. A former HOA treasurer, a nervous woman in her 60s, took the stand. Her voice wavered as she exposed the illegal transfers of HOA funds, detailing how Karen had pressured board members into signing off on fabricated expenses. Then came a man who had lost his home to one of Karen's fraudulent foreclosures. "She drowned us in fines, then said we had no choice but to sell. A month after we were forced out, the house was back on the market, sold to one of her husband's companies." Maxwell watched Karen's face as the testimonies piled up. Her confidence was unraveling, but the final blow came when Mike called a forensic accountant to the stand. "Based on our investigation," the accountant stated, flipping through a thick report, "we found that over $250,000 in HOA funds had now been misappropriated under Ms. Whitmore's tenure. Furthermore, the foreclosure cases she pursued were based on fabricated violations, violating both state and federal laws." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Karen stiffened in her seat, her fingers tightening into fists. Then Mike delivered the finishing move. "Your Honor, we also have documents showing that Ms. Whitmore personally profited from these fraudulent foreclosures. In light of this, we are requesting an immediate injunction on all HOA foreclosure proceedings and the removal of Ms. Whitmore from her position." Karen shot up from her chair, her carefully maintained composure crumbling. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "I was just enforcing the rules. They weren't my rules." The judge's gavel struck the bench. "Ms. Whitmore, you will sit down and remain silent, or I will hold you in contempt." Karen's mouth opened as if to argue, but for the first time in her reign, she had lost control. When the judge finally ruled in Maxwell's favor, freezing all HOA financial accounts, nullifying his fraudulent foreclosure, and opening an official, criminal investigation into Karen's actions, it was over. Karen sat, silent and pale, as the weight of reality crashed down on her. She hadn't just lost. She had destroyed herself. Maxwell exhaled slowly, feeling a deep, satisfying sense of justice. It wasn't just about winning. It was about making sure no one else suffered under Karen's corruption ever again. The courtroom fell into a tense silence as the judge shuffled a stack of papers before delivering the final ruling. All eyes were on Karen Whitmore, whose once confident demeanor had dissolved into barely concealed panic. The court finds that the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, under the leadership of Ms. Whitmore, engaged in fraudulent financial practices, illegal foreclosures, and abuse of authority. The judge's voice was firm, unwavering. As a result, this court rules in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Mercer. A wave of relief washed over Maxwell, though he kept his expression controlled. He had expected this outcome, but hearing it aloud, watching Karen squirm under the weight of her own corruption, was still immensely satisfying. Furthermore, the judge continued, effective immediately, the Oak Ridge Estates HOA is ordered to pay $500,000 in restitution to impacted homeowners, and all fraudulent fines and foreclosures are nullified. Ms. Whitmore is permanently barred from holding any leadership position within any homeowners association. The gasps from the spectators were audible, followed by hushed whispers. The sentence was harsh, but deserved. Karen shot to her feet. "You can't do this! I was protecting the community!" she shrieked, but her own lawyer pulled her back. Down, his face grim. Then came the final blow. The judge's gaze sharpened. Additionally, due to substantial evidence of financial misconduct, this case is being referred to the district attorney's office for further criminal investigation. Karen froze, the blood draining from her face. That wasn't just a fine. That meant possible jail time. As the courtroom emptied, several HOA members avoided Karen's gaze, some shaking their heads in disappointment. Others, emboldened by the verdict, turned on her outright. "You lied to us, Karen," one man muttered. "We trusted you," another homeowner scoffed. "You were stealing from us the whole time, weren't you?" Karen had no words. She was finished. As Maxwell stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air, he smiled. The fight was over. Justice had been served. And he had protected what was his. With Karen disgraced and removed, the HOA found itself crippled. Homeowners, now aware of the corruption that had plagued them for years, wanted nothing to do with the broken system. Fines were reversed, lawsuits piled up, and some residents, those who had blindly followed Karen, began struggling under the financial mess she left behind. Maxwell saw an opportunity. One by one, he quietly bought out properties from homeowners desperate to escape, not to exploit them, but to liberate them. Within months, Maxwell had acquired enough influence to propose dismantling the HOA altogether. The remaining members, eager to rid themselves of the toxic leadership and avoid further legal trouble, voted in favor. With a stroke of a pen, the HOA that Karen had ruled with an iron fist ceased to exist. On the day the HOA's office was officially shut down, Maxwell left a single letter on Karen's former desk. It read, "Power isn't in controlling others. It's in doing what's right. You lost everything because you never understood the difference." With that, he walked away, knowing the community was finally free. And that was the real victory. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the next part, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated. See you in the next one. Your support means the world.